The courtroom grew still as Tom Hanks stepped through the grand wooden doors, his modest gray suit standing in sharp contrast to the gleaming marble and polished mahogany surrounding him. From the bench, Judge James E. Boasberg stared down, a cold smirk playing on his lips. Moments earlier, he had been overheard in his chambers muttering, "Another Hollywood star who thinks he's untouchable. I'll humble Hanks today." The actor moved forward, his usual confident stride now slower, more deliberate. The courtroom brimmed with journalists and onlookers, all eager to see one of America's most beloved figures square off against one of Washington's most feared federal judges. What no one in the room knew was that Judge Boasberg had made up his mind before a single word of testimony was ever spoken. His deep ties to influential real estate developers created an obvious conflict of interest in the land dispute case, yet he had declined to remove himself. Striking the gavel with a sharp crack, Boasberg addressed Hanks, his tone laced with contempt. "Mr. Hanks, this court isn't swayed by Hollywood fame." The audience gasped at the judge's brazen hostility, but what unfolded next would leave them utterly stunned, because Tom Hanks hadn't walked into that courtroom unprepared. He'd spent the last 6 months quietly setting the stage for a legal showdown that would catch everyone off guard. Before we dive deeper into this astonishing battle between America's favorite actor and a corrupt federal judge, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful tales where justice beats the odds. 3 years earlier, Tom Hanks had bought a historic townhouse in Washington, D.C., a stunning 19th century building with rich cultural value. His plan was to restore it and turn it into a community art center for disadvantaged children. Though abandoned and crumbling, Hanks saw beauty where others saw only ruin. "Every child deserves a space to explore their imagination," he had told the local council while announcing the project. But Hanks's philanthropic vision clashed directly with the ambitions of Wellington Properties, a powerful development firm that had been quietly snapping up buildings on the same block. Their vision: demolish the entire row and build upscale condominiums. The only thing standing in their way? Hanks's townhouse, positioned squarely in the heart of their proposed complex. Judge Boasberg, appointed to the federal bench in 2011, had cultivated an image of a by-the-book, ethical judge. But behind this public facade was a man enmeshed in corporate entanglements. During his early judicial career, he had received large campaign contributions from Wellington, and his brother-in-law happened to be the corporation's lead legal advisor. These connections were hidden under layers of LLCs and shadowy financial structures. Wellington made Hanks a series of aggressive offers, but he stood firm. "This isn't about profit," he'd insisted. "It's about preserving history and giving back." Infuriated by his refusal, Wellington turned to their most dependable asset, Judge Boasberg. Their attorneys filed a flimsy lawsuit citing alleged zoning violations and permitting issues, aiming to derail the restoration. Once the case landed in Boasberg's courtroom, Wellington's executives shared quiet smirks. They knew their problem was about to vanish. To Hanks, this case was about more than real estate. It represented his commitment to giving children, kids like the one he once was, a safe place to dream. "I remember what it felt like to have nowhere to go after school," he had said. "Every kid deserves better." To Boasberg, it was just business. Rule against the actor, clear the path. Wellington's development and receive the usual gratitude from his powerful friends, the judge had done this dance many times before. With less prominent defendants, the fact that his target was now one of America's most beloved actors only made the challenge more enticing. What the judge didn't know was that Tom Hanks had noticed inconsistencies in the court filings. Curious and concerned, the actor had quietly hired a team of legal researchers and former FBI forensic accountants. "Something doesn't add up here," he had told them. "I want to know what I'm really up against." As Tom Hanks sat at the defendant's table that morning, he appeared nervous and unprepared, exactly as Judge Boasberg expected, but beneath the actor's humble exterior lay months of meticulous preparation and a strategy that would shock everyone in the courtroom. The preliminary hearing began with Judge Boasberg's barely concealed hostility. He interrupted Hanks's attorney, repeatedly dismissed evidence supporting the actor's case, and sustained nearly every objection from Wellington's legal team. The pattern was so blatant that even veteran court reporters exchanged glances. "Your Honor," Hanks's attorney began, "we have documentation proving all permits were properly filed and approved by the Historical Buildings Commission." Judge Boasberg waved his hand dismissively. "Irrelevant, the Commission's approval doesn't override municipal zoning codes, but Your Honor, Municipal Code 47.3b specifically grants exemptions for historical restoration projects." That Counselor Boasberg cut in sharply. "I'm well aware of the municipal code. Perhaps you should spend less time explaining the law to me and more time preparing your client for the consequences of his obstruction." The gallery murmured in surprise at the judge's inappropriate comment. This wasn't just tough questioning, it was openly biased behavior from a federal judge. Tom Hanks leaned forward, whispering something to his attorney, who looked surprised, but nodded. The actor then stood up, addressing the court directly. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I'd like to request a brief recess to consult with my legal team." Boasberg smirked clearly, enjoying the actor's apparent discomfort. "Mr. Hanks, this court runs on my schedule, not Hollywood's. Your request is denied. Continue with your case, what little there is of it." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the Wellington attorney's table. While reporters scribbled furiously, the judge was practically performing for his corporate audience. As the morning progressed, the judge's bias became increasingly flagrant when Hanks's team presented architectural plans showing how the restoration would actually enhance the neighborhood. Boasberg interrupted Mr. Hanks. "Do you think your celebrity status entitles you to special treatment in my courtroom?" The actor remained composed. "No, Your Honor. I believe the law entitles every citizen to fair treatment in every courtroom." The subtle emphasis on fair wasn't lost on those present. A few spectators nodded in approval. Boasberg's face darkened. "Perhaps in your movies. Mr. Hanks, you can rewrite the script when you don't like the direction things are heading, and in my courtroom I determine the outcome based on the law, not on Hollywood fantasy." During the lunch recess, Hanks huddled with his legal team in a conference room. "It's worse than we expected." His lead attorney said he's not even pretending to be impartial. Hanks nodded solemnly. "Then it's time for Plan B. Are we ready?" His legal team exchanged nervous glances. "It's risky. Tom, going after a federal judge this directly could backfire dramatically." The actor looked at each of them in turn. "Sometimes the only way to fight corruption is to bring it into the light. Let's proceed." When court resumed, Wellington's attorneys presented their case with smug confidence, displaying doctored photographs suggesting Hanks's property was structurally unsound and dangerous. Judge Boasberg nodded sympathetically at each of their points. "Upon evidence clearly shows that Mr. Hanks's vanity project presents a public safety hazard," Wellington's lead attorney concluded. "We request an immediate injunction requiring the property to be sold at market value." A compelling presentation. Boasberg remarked, looking satisfied. "Mr. Hanks, do you have anything meaningful to add before I make my ruling?" The tension in the courtroom was electric. Everyone could see the case was being railroaded. Several reporters looked uncomfortable, sensing they were witnessing a miscarriage of justice against a beloved public figure. Hanks stood slowly. "Yes, Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to introduce new evidence that has recently come to light." Boasberg frowned. "New evidence at this stage is highly irregular, Mr. Hanks. So is judicial corruption, Your Honor." Hanks replied quietly. The courtroom froze. Did America's most likable actor just accuse a federal judge of corruption in open court? Boasberg's face flushed with anger. "You are walking on very thin ice. Mr. Hanks, one more comment like that and I'll hold you in contempt." Tom Hanks remained standing, his expression now transformed from nervousness to firm resolve. "Your Honor, I'd like to file a motion for your immediate recusal from this case based on documented conflicts of interest with Wellington Properties." The Wellington attorneys jumped to their feet, objecting loudly, but they fell silent when Hanks's legal team began distributing thick binders to the court clerk, the court reporter, and each attorney present. "What is the meaning of this?" Boasberg demanded, his voice rising as a binder was placed before him. Hanks spoke clearly, his voice carrying throughout the now silent courtroom evidence of 27 separate financial transactions between Your Honor and Wellington Properties over the past 5 years, channeled through shell corporations and offshore. Accounts evidence that your brother-in-law William Fairchild serves as Wellington's chief counsel while providing you with undisclosed financial benefits, and evidence that you met privately with Wellington executives 4 times in the past month alone. Judge Boasberg's face drained of color as he stared at the binder before him. The first page contained a photograph of him entering a private dining room with Wellington's CEO dated just 2 days earlier. "This is outrageous," he finally sputtered. "I will not be accused. I'm not accusing, Your Honor," Hanks replied calmly. "I'm presenting evidence as a citizen concerned about judicial integrity. I've also taken the liberty of forwarding these materials to the Judicial Conduct Committee, the Department of Justice, and several national news organizations." Cameras clicked rapidly as photographers captured the judge's stunned expression. The courtroom erupted into chaos as reporters rushed for the doors, eager to break the story. Judge Boasberg slammed his gavel repeatedly, desperately trying to regain control of his courtroom order. "I will have order." His face had progressed from white shock to mottled red fury. "This court is in recess for 30 minutes. As Boasberg retreated to his chambers, the courtroom buzzed with excitement. Legal experts present began flipping through the binders, their expressions growing increasingly grave. "This is unprecedented," a former Justice Department attorney whispered to a reporter. "I'm looking at clear evidence of judicial misconduct that could lead to criminal charges." Tom Hanks remained at the defendant's table, calm and focused. This wasn't the flustered, intimidated celebrity Boasberg had expected to humiliate. This was a man who had methodically built a case while allowing the judge to believe he held all the power inside his chambers. Boasberg frantically called Wellington's executives. How did he get this information? "These were private meetings," he hissed into the phone. The panic in his voice was unmistakable. Meanwhile, Tom Hanks's legal strategy was revealed to the observer still in the courtroom 6 months earlier. When the lawsuit first appeared, something had felt wrong to the actor. The claims against his property seemed fabricated, the legal arguments strained rather than simply hiring expensive attorneys to fight the case conventionally. Hanks had quietly assembled a team of former FBI financial crimes specialists, forensic accountants, and investigative journalists. Mr. Hanks approached this like research for a role. His lead investigator explained to an astonished lawyer from a public interest group. He wanted to understand every aspect of how judicial corruption works in real estate cases. He personally participated in the investigation, sometimes reviewing documents until 3 a.m. When court resumed, Judge Boasberg returned, looking visibly shaken. His haughty demeanor had vanished, replaced by the cautious expression of a man suddenly aware he was standing on a trap door in light of the materials presented. He began choosing his words carefully. "This court will take a 1-day recess to review the arguments from both sides." Tom Hanks rose again. "Your Honor, with respect, the only appropriate action is your immediate recusal. These documents clearly establish that you have received approximately $1.4 million in disguised benefits from Wellington Properties while presiding over cases involving their interests." Boasberg's eyes widened at the precise figure. This was no fishing expedition, but a detailed accounting of his secret arrangements. Furthermore, Hanks continued, "I've prepared a formal motion demonstrating that this case against my property was fabricated specifically to force its sale. The true motivation, as documented in Wellington's internal communications, was to complete their acquisition of the entire block for luxury condominiums, destroying a historic building and eliminating the planned community art center." The actor's voice took on a passionate quality, familiar to millions of moviegoers. "This case isn't just about one building or one corrupt judge. It's about whether our legal system serves justice or is for sale to the highest bidder." Reporters frantically typed on their phones, sending updates to their outlets within minutes. The story was breaking nationally. Tom Hanks exposes federal judges' corruption in dramatic courtroom confrontation. Boasberg looked at the court officers who were watching the proceedings with undisguised interest. Rather than maintaining their usual stoic expressions, he glanced at his own baif, who avoided eye contact. The power dynamic had completely reversed. "This court stands in recess," he finally announced, his voice barely audible. "I will take the recusal motion under advisement and issue my decision tomorrow morning." As Boasberg hurried from the courtroom, a senior Department of Justice attorney entered with several FBI agents. They approached Tom Hanks respectfully. "Mr. Hanks, we'd like to speak with you about the evidence you've uncovered. This appears to extend beyond one judge and one corporation." The actor nodded, unsurprised. "My team found connections to 3 other judges and numerous development projects across the city. The complete files are ready for your review." Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered as news of the confrontation spread. When Tom Hanks emerged, he was greeted with applause and cheers rather than grandstanding. He simply smiled and said, "Today is about something more important than any one person. It's about ensuring that justice truly is blind." A reporter shouted, "How did you know to investigate the judge, Mr. Hanks?" The actor paused thoughtfully before answering. "Throughout my career, I've played ordinary people who find themselves in extraordinary circumstances. The common thread in those stories is that one person standing up for truth can make a difference. I didn't set out to expose corruption. I just wanted to understand why someone was trying to stop a community arts center for children." Another reporter called out, "Were you afraid of taking on a federal judge?" "Less afraid than I was of letting corruption win," Hanks replied simply. "There are some fights you can't walk away from even when the odds seem overwhelming." As cameras flashed around him, Tom Hanks had transformed in the public's perception from just another wealthy celebrity into something far more powerful, a citizen who had used his resources to fight corruption that would have gone unchallenged for most ordinary Americans. By that evening, legal experts across every major network were analyzing the implications. What Tom Hanks did today was essentially a private citizen's investigation that accomplished what our formal oversight systems failed to do, noted a former federal prosecutor on CNN on Fox News. Even commentators, typically critical of Hollywood, praised the actor. "Whatever, your politics exposing corruption in our courts deserves commendation." Hanks showed real courage today. Social media exploded with memes and hashtags. "Why Hanks for Justice" and "AJ Boasberg Busted" trended nationwide. Citizens shared stories of their own encounters with biased judges and rigged local government decisions. The next morning, an ashen-faced Judge Boasberg issued a turf statement announcing his recusal to avoid any appearance of impropriety. But it was too late for damage control. The Justice Department had already launched a formal investigation, and 2 other judges linked to Wellington Properties had also suddenly recused themselves from pending cases in the weeks following the courtroom confrontation. The ripple effects spread throughout Washington's legal and political establishments. Judge Boasberg, once considered a rising star, possibly headed for the Supreme Court, submitted his resignation from the federal bench as the Justice Department investigation expanded. Wellington Properties found itself under intense scrutiny. Search warrants executed at their headquarters revealed documents implicating company executives in systematic judicial bribery, extending back more than a decade. Their stock plummeted as investors fled, and class action lawsuits were filed by property owners who believed they had been victimized in previous court cases. Tom Hanks, meanwhile, became an unexpected symbol of citizen activism against corruption. Law schools invited him to speak about his investigative methods, and his upcoming appearance before a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on judicial ethics was scheduled for live broadcast on every major network. The historic townhouse at the ecenter of the case was now proceeding with restoration as planned, but with an unexpected addition. A legal resource center for community members facing similar property disputes would occupy the ground floor alongside the arts programs. What began as a simple desire to create space for children's creativity has evolved into something more, Hanks explained during a community meeting at the partially renovated building. This will now also be a place where ordinary citizens can get help navigating a legal system that too often favors the powerful. The actor had received thousands of letters from Americans sharing their own stories of encountering corruption in local courts, rather than bask in his victory. He assembled a non-profit organization of volunteer attorneys and investigators to review the most egregious cases. 6 months after the confrontation, a comprehensive judicial reform bill was working its way through Congress, with unusually strong bipartisan support dubbed the Hanks Act by the media, though officially titled the Judicial Transparency and Ethics Enhancement Act. It mandated stricter financial disclosure requirements for federal judges and created an independent review body with real investigative power. Sometimes it takes a dramatic public moment to catalyze change that should have happened long ago, noted a senior senator sponsoring the legislation. Mr. Hanks didn't just expose one corrupt judge, he exposed weaknesses in a system we've trusted too blindly. Legal scholars pointed out the historical significance of what had occurred. This case will be taught in law schools for generations, said the dean of Georgetown Law. It demonstrates how a determined private citizen used legal tools to expose corruption that our institutional safeguards missed completely. For Wellington Properties, the aftermath was devastating. 6 executives faced federal charges, and the company's projects nationwide were now under investigation by state attorneys. The planned luxury condominiums would never be built. Instead, the block was being redesignated as a historic district with strict preservation requirements. Judge Boasberg's fall from grace was equally dramatic. As the investigation progressed, connections between his judicial decisions and personal financial gain became impossible to ignore. Former colleagues distanced themselves, and his previous rulings were now being reviewed for potential bias. Legal experts predicted he would likely face disbarment and possibly criminal charges in a reflective interview marking 1 year since the courtroom confrontation. Tom Hanks downplayed his own role. "I had resources that made this possible: investigators, researchers, and the financial means to pursue the truth without fear of being outspent. Most Americans facing corrupt systems don't have those advantages. That's why the real work has. I doubt just begun. The real work," he referenced, was his new foundation dedicated to judicial accountability, which was now providing resources to citizens in similar situations. Nationwide, already it had helped expose corrupt arrangements between developers and officials in 3 other major cities. The story of Tom Hanks versus Judge Boasberg became more than just a celebrity news cycle. It evolved into a powerful reminder that systems, no matter how entrenched, can be changed when enough light is shed on their darkest corners, the true measure of our justice system. Hanks told a graduating law school class, "Isn't how it treats the powerful and connected. It's how it protects the ordinary citizen who walks into court believing that truth and law still matter more than money and influence." As Wellington Properties' former headquarters was being repurposed into affordable housing, a fitting symbolic end to the corrupt developer's legacy, legal reform advocates held up the case as evidence that change was possible, even in the most entrenched systems. What happened in that courtroom wasn't just about one judge or one property dispute, explained a judicial ethics expert. It was about whether we're willing to accept that justice can be purchased, or whether we still believe in the fundamental promise that all citizens stand equal before the law. For ordinary Americans watching the story unfold, perhaps the most powerful message was that corruption, no matter how well protected, is ultimately vulnerable to persistent pursuit of truth. A system that had seemed impenetrable was revealed to have cracks that one determined citizen had widened into a fundamental breach. As this story about corruption and justice continues to reverberate through courtrooms across America, one thing is clear: sometimes it takes an unexpected hero to remind us that the systems we create are only as honorable as the people who operate them, and occasionally it takes someone stepping out of their expected role, like an actor known for playing fictional heroes becoming a real-life champion of judicial integrity, to inspire others to demand better from institutions we've trusted with our most fundamental rights. If you've been inspired by this remarkable true story of courage against corruption, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things to make our systems work as they should. Together, we can ensure that light continues to shine in places where darkness has too long prevailed.